Hi, Pam. How are you today?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for asking. I'm present and I'm here and I'm definitely looking forward to our conversation today. So you said you're okay. Tell me about those feelings. Usually you're like, I'm great. How are you doing? I just kind of noticed.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm a little stressed after an exchange that happened yesterday. As you know, I have been working with a group of 14 to 16-year-olds,
Mhm.
and we are, doing some mental work with around mental health and most of the youth are of different backgrounds than myself. I am white and most of them are not.
Mhm.
And I've tried to be really sensitive and humble, and just aware. And we were talking about family and family units and family structures and their backgrounds, and how sometimes, like, because of our backgrounds, there's stigma around mental illness. Like, some people, their families are like understanding, and some people, their cultures are more like suck it up. And just trying to be really open and create space. And one of the group members just told me that they feel like I can't help them, that I've never had a mental illness and I don't know what I'm talking about, and how can a white therapist help me? And I can acknowledge that as a white person, I there are so much about their lived experience I don't know, but still was like, in the moment, I was just like, all I was able to say was, "I'm sorry you feel that way."
Def- yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's definitely a situation you had to go through, but um, it did sound like it was definitely a tough conversation for everyone, and including yourself. So I definitely, before kind of just diving into the whole situation, I kind of want to touch base on how you felt that conversation went.
I felt like things were going okay. People, we set we have group agreements, and we've been doing a really good job of holding them.
Mhm.
And you know, wasn't making assumptions about where anybody was coming from. We were just discussing it because, family culture, whether it's just specifically like the culture of your family as it developed, or more racial and ethnic culture, does have a massive impact on mental health. And we were just trying to draw that understanding out amongst the group.
Mhm.
And I thought we were I had set a space where we could navigate those waters, if you will, and then to just have the group member, snap at me, and make assumptions about me, because I have had issues with mental health and mental illness.
Yeah.
I've struggled with anxiety and depression, um, and so they don't to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about when I have lived experience and professional experience was really hurtful in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, first, I appreciate you kind of opening up about those feelings and reflecting on it, because, it is hurtful sometimes as a professional when someone feels that, you may question your inadequacy of doing your job. And, you are one of our amazing workers here. I just wanted to point that out. And you show great strengths when you are, creating this space for them to be open, and you're having these tough conversations about culture and stigma and mental health, and you know and then to disclose your mental health issues is also, I want to commend you on that, because that's not easy, and it shows a sense of vulnerability, which I greatly appreciate. Because it gives me a little more understanding of you and how this may actually have hurt you personally as well, right? So thank you for sharing that. But something that else I wanted to acknowledge was, you were talking about family structure and culture and how that may play into possible, um, the understanding of mental health and how we practice it. How do you feel that maybe some of those identities and labels have played into maybe how the kid was reacting or the student was reacting?
That's a good question. Let me think on that for a
Mhm.
second. Um, Now that you mention it, it was one of our more quiet group members throughout group and in this particular conversation, and I was trying to encourage their participation, and obviously I didn't. I was trying to encourage their participation, so I don't have the full picture. So it's very possible that could have been poking some tender spots for them around family and stigma, and they just weren't um, ready or willing to go there in the group.
Definitely. Yeah, and that takes great self-awareness within yourself as a professional to see that. It could have definitely been a very sensitive subject. Do you have any knowledge of his family history or his culture?
He identifies as African American,
Mhm,
and I know that he's very close with his older brother,
mhm.
but his older brother has recently moved out of state. So perhaps that is contributing to his unwillingness or discomfort around the topic of discussing family, especially since his uh, his diagnosis with some mental health issues has come after his brother left. So one of his core supports hasn't been there for some of this, especially since he joined the group.
Okay. So it sounds like there could have been a lot of things going on with this conversation. You have that's a very quiet individual in your group who identifies as an identity that is different than yours.
Mhm.
He has maybe he's feeling some type of way because his brother moved out and then he was diagnosed with a mental illness. And here we are talking about in this group family structure, stigmas, diagnosis,
Mhm.
um, and so that could be very triggering for him, to
Yeah.
say the least. And that may have resulted in maybe the way he reacted, right?
Yeah.
Um, since he was very quiet, this was maybe his first time very speaking out. Maybe it was a very empowering situation for him in a sense to kind of gain control.
Mhm.
Um, how do you feel about that statement?
I think it's very. Um, I think that's you make excellent points.
Hmm.
He is a different identity than me, and he's a marginalized identity at that. And so, um, he there's some vulnerability around it, and then when you compound it with being marginalized because of his racial background, and then the talking about stigma because of mental illness, this young man has a lot of hurdles on his plate that
Definitely.
I do see where he might think that I have no ability to understand. Um, but my hope going forward is that, and I wish I had been able to say more than I'm sorry you feel that way.
Mhm,
Um, that was just my careful response in the moment.
mhm,
But that he knows that I don't pretend that I know everything about his life and his lived experience, but I just wanted to know that I care and I'm inviting him to share with me and the group so that we can offer empathy.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I appreciate you saying that you wish you could have said something different in the moment. I just want to validate that you had a very, very normal response. When we hear something, tragic or something happens, our natural instinct is just to say sorry. But for you to be able to say, I wish I could have said something other than sorry, it shows that you are taking the next critical thinking steps of what you could have done better as a professional, or maybe some areas that you could have improved. And that just shows how you are really invested in this learning process with the individual, and you being a supervisor and you holding kind of that control, and how that control just played out. But how do you feel like you can kind of regain that trust, or kind of go off of what you said? How do you feel like you can move forward with that relationship with that individual?
I It's difficult because my response the other day was, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I think I would like to begin with a more genuine um apology that's not just like, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
I want to take some more accountability as the person responsible for that space, that it wasn't comfortable or safe for him in that moment. And that's why he said what he said to me.
Mhm.
And I want to hold that he's a young man and it is not his responsibility to help me do my job. But I do want to get his buy in and ask him, are there things that I can do to support his comfort in this space?
Is that
Um,
a conversation you're willing to have with him?
yes, yes. I might I want to have it kind of one on one and not in front of the rest of the group. So I'll probably ask one of my peers to like kind of be a second presence in the room and kind of just help the rest of the group get settled in
Yeah.
while I have that conversation at the beginning with him.
Yeah, and we can definitely support you in that. Ask that if you want someone to come in, we can maybe, see who's available in the office to support you and having that conversation with them. Because I definitely think it's important to admit and hold yourself accountable that, you're having this feelings of um, that you wish you could have reacted better in that moment, right? And I
Yeah.
think when you admit to some of your faults, or admit that you wish you could have done better, it shows a great vulnerability that you can start kind of rebuilding that relationship with him. And I think that's, he needs to have that to start developing trust with you, right? So you've definitely set the stones in place. You've talked about group agreements, you've identified your identity, you were doing everything right to, build that path for a trusting relationship. But other factors come into play, right? And we are dealing with a vulnerable group that is dealing with a lot of previous trauma that may come up for them, that trust may be disrupted.
Mhm.
So it's kind of our responsibility to see that, acknowledge it, and
Mhm.
figure out ways that we can rebuild that trust with that individual and how that looks like for them, because it's going to be different for everybody. So it's like I said, it sounds like you were doing everything right, and he just had a response, maybe in regards to the trauma that he was reliving in that moment, and being stigmatized by a white woman in authority in his mind, right? um but yeah, so I appreciate you willing to have that discussion with him and start that process of rebuilding trust um, with him. So something else I just wanted to kind of you know reflect on and kind of lead overall to the conclusion of kind of this conversation is, um, you said that he was really close with his brother. Is there any way that we can possibly, get in touch with the brother? I feel like if we can kind of maybe bring the brother in, that would definitely support his trust in us to know that, hey, if you need that family support in your life, if you're not receiving that, that's maybe something that our agency can provide. So it's kind of highlighting our agency's, um, kind of use of power to kind of bring in some of those support systems for him. So is that something that, is possible?
Thank you so much for bringing that up about whole person wellness and whole family wellness. And I think what I uh, would like to do is when I talk to him, I'll ask him like, "Do you want to call your brother? Would that be helpful?" And I want to show awareness and empathy, but I want to leave it his choice.
Yes.
So I think that is, thank you so much for helping me think of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the only reason why I'm thinking of these things is because you've been such, a great um, person in reflecting about this experience and what that meant for you, and your personal identity, and how that looks for him and his identity, and maybe some of the triggers coming up with that family structure. So we wouldn't be able to have this conversation if it wasn't for your willingness to have an open heart and open mind and be a really good reflector. So I appreciate you allowing me to enter this conversation with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I started this call so upset that I had just really messed it up with this young man. And I feel like I have some concrete steps I can take with him.
Yeah, and it's okay to feel like we messed up, that we're only human, and we're not, social workers are not perfectionists. We don't have all the answers and the solutions in that moment. So just take it for a learning process and situation, and next time you'll know how to react. And now we just put forth those steps. So maybe in the next supervision. So what are you gonna do? So let's talk about that process real quick.
Yeah.
So I can, next supervision, I could follow up with each of those steps.
Yeah.
How are you gonna proceed with the student?
Yeah, so I want to connect with him at the beginning of our next group very intentionally and kind of one-on-one. So I'm going to ask one of my peers to just help the group get settled in, do their check-ins, and kind of get them all settled. And hopefully in that time, I can have a brief sort of moment to connect with the young man and meaningfully apologize and kind of own how I was pushing him, and just let him know that I'm here to support him. I can acknowledge that I did that and ask him if there are some resources that we aren't tapping into to better support him. For example, calling and reaching out to his brother. So I feel like those are the path I'm going to take with this issue, and then we can follow it up with my next supervision, see how it goes.
Definitely. And I will make sure that, we will definitely follow up and, see how this works for you and him. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.